Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Professor Karen Stanton, Vice Chancellor of Solent University. It's great to have so many students, colleagues, and guests from the community joining us today. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to welcome you to this event, which launches both our new Solent Business School and the Solent Law School. The university has created these two new schools to meet the need from students for real-world learning and to make sure our graduates are ready for the future. The graduates from these two new schools will be agile of thought and will possess the skills and the knowledge required to enable the UK economy and society more generally to take advantage of the opportunities presented by a post-pandemic and a Brexit world. To mark this important and historic moment for the university, I'm pleased to welcome our Chancellor Theo Paphitis, well-known retail entrepreneur, small business champion, and of course, a stalwart of the BBC's Dragon's Den. Theo is joined today by the Right Honourable Baroness Morgan of Cotes, a former lawyer and Secretary of State for Education, and now a member of the House of Lords All-Party Committee on COVID-19. Today's webinar with Theo and Baroness Morgan is the highlight of a week-long series of events to launch our two new schools. The topic for today's conversation is preparing for the COVID-19 recovery. The session will touch on how universities, businesses, and entrepreneurs can bounce back from the pandemic and the important role our two new schools will have in shaping the business and legal landscape of the future. Thank you to those of you who have submitted questions in advance, and we'll hopefully have time for those towards the end of the session. So without further ado, I'm now going to hand over to Theo to introduce this morning's event. Theo.
Thank you very much, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's very exciting to see two new schools at the university. I think the most exciting thing for me is the fact that we've got two very focused schools, which before were part of a different faculty, and will be able to meet the new challenges that we're all going to have to deal with in the post-COVID world, which in my business is very much all about agility and being able to adapt to the changing world. So it's a great pleasure to be here. And it's great to meet Nikki, who I've only met before via television, often seen her. And Nikki, I'm not quite sure. What I do know from the small bit of research I've done on you is that you're a Surbiton girl.
I am indeed. Yes, I grew up there and I went to Surbiton High. But sadly, when I got to the House of Lords, there was already a Baroness, somebody of Surbiton, so I couldn't take that in my title. Okay, so that was obviously one of my questions. I'm hugely disappointed. I'm just down the road in Weybridge. Yes. And my girls went to Claremont Fancourt, just round the corner from where you were, and they always said, "Don't mess around with the Surbiton girls." So that was their mantra. But what I would like to know is, what came first? Was it law or politics? Well, very good question, and thank you for the invitation to be here this morning. And it's a pleasure, and congratulations to the university on the two new schools, which I think are going to be fantastic. So one of the things I've done after leaving government is to join something called the Careers and Enterprise Company board, and that was something I set up or helped set up when I was Education Secretary. And the reason I'm telling you this is because the reason I did law and politics is because my dad was involved with both. He was a criminal barrister, but he was also a local councillor. So we had lots of political discussions, but also legal discussions around the dinner table. And I think what the schools at Solent offer is hopefully some inspiration for people. It's very easy, isn't it, to look around and see what family and friends are doing, but actually there are many fantastic jobs out there, and I don't regret doing law or politics. They were absolutely right for me, but there are lots of things I never knew anything about as an opportunity to have a career in. So in answer to your question, what came first? Law came first, in the sense that I obviously was a lawyer. I studied law at university. I'm a qualified solicitor. I did corporate law, so mergers and acquisitions, helping businesses to grow, but also to sell bits of themselves. I spent a lot of time, for older members of the audience, they might remember ICI. I spent a lot of time as a junior lawyer selling bits of ICI off to other companies. But politics is always there in my blood, and I joined the Conservative Party at the age of 16. I was involved in politics throughout university. I did my legal career, but I was always tempted that maybe I might go into politics. But there is no certainty in life in politics. You put your name forward, you may or may not get chosen for a seat, you may or may not get elected. So I am immensely grateful every day, actually, that I did law as well, because it's been foundational in my approach to life and my career.
Well, you obviously got involved very young, and you've actually left politics very young.
That's very kind of you to say. If you could see the amount of grey hairs that need covering up because the hairdresser's not open, you wouldn't necessarily say that, but thank you. I'll accept the compliment.
Well, so you left politics. You still have a career path after politics.
Yeah.
But I'm going to ask you, I'm going to switch across slightly, because even though you're incredibly young, got it in twice, you did enter an incredibly male-dominated world.
Yeah.
Both in politics and law.
Yeah.
And I know many of the students watching today, especially the female students, would want to know what that's like, and what were the challenges, and what is it that they now need to expect, and what has changed in that time?
So you're absolutely right, and I still think probably both of the upper echelons are still pretty male dominated. So in law, for example, and talking on the solicitor side of things, I think it's over 50% of trainee solicitors are women. But when you look at the ranks of partnership in firms, actually there still aren't enough women there, and I think it does matter, because there's that great phrase, you can't be what you can't see. And I think we need to see people who are like us. And we're talking about gender diversity, but of course there's many forms of diversity. We need to see people like us at senior levels to know what we're aiming for. And politics is the same. Fun enough, there was an event last night looking at an organisation called Women to Win, which gets more women standing and hopefully being elected in the Conservative Party. When I was elected in 2010, there were 47 Conservative female MPs. There are now 87, but you look at the ranks of the opposition, and over half of the Labour Parliamentary Party is female. So I think it's fair to say we've got a way to go. And my takeaway from all this is, it's a couple of things, but I think being clear about having those ambitions, and also, as you say, Theo, I mean, I'm now, as a friend said to me recently, I'm now on my third iteration of my career, if you like. So being flexible, but also being determined. And I think what we need to do, we do it in a different way, is that networking, and meeting people, seeing who can help your career, put a good word in, give you that advice, finding a mentor. But the other thing I say when I speak to female audiences is never be afraid to speak up, whether it's in a meeting at work, or a partnership board, or whether it's a meeting in Westminster. Actually, I'm afraid to say that often, women will check themselves and will say, I'm not sure I'm going to make that point. Maybe somebody else is going to make it. I'm afraid to say lots of men don't have that as a filter. And so get in there. But it's also incumbent on senior women. If you see, women around the table, junior women, make sure you're bringing them into the conversation. Because that's how we find and we encourage people to make sure that these are not male-dominated worlds. It's getting better, but as I say, there's definitely more to be done.
You started work for an eminent law firm, Travers Smith. Then you decided to have an aberration and go into politics. God knows why, but there we are. Someone's got to do it. But of course, you left there. I don't know what stage of your career you were in the law world when you left there, but I read that you've gone back now you've left politics. Now, tell me, what has happened in that intervening period in that law firm? And I'm putting you on the spot now.
Well, the weird thing, of course, is because of 2020, I haven't physically been back to the law firm. So everything I've done has been virtual. I mean, what they've got is a female senior partner, Kath Russ. First time the firm's had a female senior partner. She's fantastic. She's a tax partner. And I think there are more women in the partnership. And the firm's obviously grown a bit and is identifying. I've gone back to be a consultant to their technology sector because my last job in government was as digital secretary. So I think that's an area that's fascinating. We might talk about that in terms of businesses and the COVID recovery and what businesses are having to do to, I'm sure in your sector, Theo, retail, the online world is just incredibly important and challenging and competitive too. But just to go back to it, I mean, I worked for 3 law firms before I went into politics. So I was in the City of London for almost 16 years. So I was a pretty senior lawyer, but I had already taken a step back in my 3rd iteration because I needed time for politics. And actually what the legal profession's done is they've created a role called a professional support lawyer. And that is for senior men and women who may not want to do frontline client work, which can be very demanding and unpredictable, but do want to have that expertise and advise clients and other lawyers in the firm on developments in the law. And I think actually that's a great development. And actually what people do sometimes is they'll go back from that role into frontline client work because they've kept their skills up. And I think that agility, hopefully, in people's careers is something that people will pick up from the business and law schools.
So you left there as Nikki, you went back as a baroness.
Yes. Yeah. Well, every time someone says baroness, I think of The Sound of Music. Wasn't there the baroness who was the unpopular potential stepmother? So, my husband is most aggrieved because, of course, if you become a baroness, if you become a lord, your other half gets a title. If you become a baroness, your other half does not get a title. So,
how does that work?
I mean, at the moment, because of our system, and it's the same actually for if it's a same-sex relationship, I don't think the other person gets a title. Anyway, I've told him he's going to have to get into the Lords in his own right eventually. So, he'll have to see if he can get there.
He'll have to put his finger out then.
Yeah, exactly.
But it takes me to the fact that it takes me neatly into the Lords because you sit on, is it the COVID committee?
It's called Life Beyond COVID. It's a select committee and it's cross-party, and we started this year, and we're trying to look 2 to 5 years into the future. Again, very relevant, I think, for people running businesses and running anything, universities. What's the COVID crisis? How's it going to change our lives? And that's one of the questions we're asking at the moment, is about everyone living their life online more, and what's that going to do?
Well, my personal view is, and I'd be interested to have the view of the committee. I know it's early days, but and by the way, I'm never a big fan of politicians. I think I've publicly said that, and I don't know why anybody would want to do it, but I would not want to be a politician and take this crisis on at the moment from whichever party. I mean, it must be the biggest hospital pass in history.
It's been very challenging for everybody. There are no right answers, as you can tell, and the judgments being made will sort of require the wisdom of Solomon. How do you balance everything? And I also feel for my former MP colleagues on all sides. I think so I was talking to my successor in Loughborough, and on one day, at the height of things, she was getting 1,000 emails a day from constituents asking for the help and answers and everything else. I mean, I think the teams of who support the MPs have worked phenomenally hard this year, and they're trying to help them, businesses access finance, constituents access health advice, you name it, and it goes through an MP's office. On the one hand, I guess, though, I mean, don't you think, Theo, that, for people running businesses who have weathered this storm, if you weathered this, you've might feel you could weather pretty much anything?
Oh, resilience is a great virtue and a great asset to have in business. And what this COVID pandemic has shown us is that in business, we need that more now than ever before, along with absolute heaps of helping of agility, and not to lean toward what we did before, because the world has changed. Fact. The world will never, ever be the same again. We're not going to go back to where we were. Now, there's an argument that says the world would have changed anyway, and it would have been in 5, 7, 8, 10 years' time. We've just accelerated that whole growth now. Now, of course, when you accelerate something that fast, you do get a huge amount of inconsistencies, a little bit of mayhem, and sadly, some damage. Fact. And it's not fair. It will never be fair. I see some of my colleagues in the hospitality industry, and my heart absolutely goes out to them, because their businesses have absolutely been trashed. Totally, utterly trashed. They rely on face-to-face contact with the customer. We are very fortunate. We can do business with the customer online, so we can adapt our business model. We can, some of our stores are allowed to stay open because they're essential. So sales have gone down, but we're still trading. The Chancellor used the biggest blunderbuss ever in living history. He stuffed it with £50 notes and pulled the trigger in March. Some of it hit the mark. Some of it was wasted. You can criticize him as much as you like, but I'm not sure he knew what the target was anyway.
Absolutely.
So he just had to throw it out there and hope it was as efficient as it could get. The job now, of course, for him is to be efficient. And now we understand so much more about what's happened. We can start planning. And it will go away. No question in my mind, COVID will go. We will flourish once more. Business will get through this. Fact, no question, we've been through a lot worse than this. We've had nobody flying over us dropping bombs. Right? I mean, it's, and yes, we've had fatalities, and it's a horrible thing for anybody to lose a loved one. But it does happen. And when we look at the stats and the ages, although, I'm fast approaching those ages that we've lost lots of family, as I have. It's just the circle of life. And we just now have to pick ourselves up. We can't feel sorry for ourselves, however bad it's been for us. And yes, there's been winners and there's been losers, but there is a future out there. What we have to do is open our eyes. By all means, learn from the past, but don't lean towards it, because it will be very, very different. So agility and change are a key part of survival coming out of this for my industry.
And how do you teach that to people coming in, or how do you encourage? And do you think that universities, entrepreneurship, I have to say, I think in education, we don't talk enough in schools about people setting up their own businesses as an option?
Well, one of the great things about Solent, it very much is a hands-on university. It's not just about academia. It's about real life learning. It's about leaving the university and finding a job or starting your own job. It's about having those skill sets, which Solent on every measure have been brilliant at since it was formed. Our students are work ready when they leave Solent. And that's the proudest thing for me, having left school with a Scottish certificate in colouring in maps. That was it. So I left school. I was dyslexic, so it was I was not academic at school. But the key thing is about people leaving education, not just with knowledge, but being work ready and being able to either be entrepreneurial, knowing what's required, or finding the right job that suits them. 50% of all small businesses fail in the first 2 years. I mean, that's a massive statistic, mainly because of a lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, many of those people go on and start another business and are more successful.
Yeah.
Because they've learned by failure. That's incredibly painful.
Yeah.
Very painful. Especially, you know, as an adult where you've got other commitments which you didn't have when you were at school or university, you know, mortgages, children, you know, all those things, other pressures on you. So if we can teach those skill sets that gets you ready, your chances of success are much higher.
Yeah.
For me, that's being work ready. That's allowing somebody to leave an educational institution ready for the outside world. And that's why I'm very proud to be Chancellor of Solent University, because that's exactly the ethos. And our motto is ready for anything.
Yeah.
And you have to be ready for anything.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so what would you say to, I mean, the opportunities, you're right, in every crisis, there are opportunities as well. And we're going to hear from the Chancellor a bit later on this morning about, you know, potential investment in infrastructure or, you know, job schemes and that sort of thing. You know, what would you say to somebody who's thinking, I've got a great idea for a business, and I think actually it's going to be just right for the post-COVID period?
I'm going to say to them exactly what I would have said to them prior COVID.
Yeah.
Because that part has not changed. And it's all about doing your, I was going to use the B word, homework here. And we all hated homework at school, hated homework at university. But the reality is, if you don't know more than your competition or the next boy or girl who's going to be competing against you, you're at a disadvantage. Yeah. So don't go out starting a business. So I'm going to start a business, very easy. It's the prep work, it's the work, it's the iceberg under the water. All that bit, all the work to prepare for your business. You don't want to, listen, why would you want to compete with anybody on a level playing field? I wouldn't. I mean, all my life, I've made sure I've had a card stacked in my favour. If I was a gambler or a poker player and I went to a casino and did that, I'd probably get beaten up and thrown out by stacking the cards in your favour. But in business, that's exactly what you can do. You can make sure you are better prepared, that you've done your homework, you understand what you're doing, that you're passionate about what you're doing. Because if you're not passionate about what you're doing, believe you me, at the first sign of difficulty, you'll fold.
Absolutely.
You've got to have that passion. You've got to be able to bore your mates in the pub talking about it. And I know my girls also went from Claremont to Solent University, and one thing they did learn at Solent was how to drink incredibly well. Seems they spent a lot of time there, as well as get great jobs
obviously working hard, yeah, as well, and getting great degrees.
Absolutely. But you've got to bore your mates in the pub with what you want to do. Yeah. If you tick all those boxes, I say to you, go for it.
Yeah.
If you don't tick those boxes, you need to reevaluate.
Yeah.
Is it really for you? Because it's not easy being entrepreneurial. When there's mayhem, of course there's opportunity. And there is mayhem at the moment. Yeah. We are seeing great institutions that we've grown up with, retailers, businesses, that are just becoming shadow of the former selves. Their competitive advantage just disappearing before your very eyes. Now that should be exciting as well as sad.
Absolutely.
Because that means there is an opportunity for you, or for me, or for anybody else. And now the way the world has changed, the technological advancement means you no longer need that huge amount of capital or that huge amount of heritage that you previously needed. So am I excited? Incredibly so.
Yeah.
Would I rather it never happened? For the fatalities that we've had and the illnesses and the damage it's done to people's families, of course, I wouldn't want this to happen. And certainly not in this, what's had that putting a plaster off really quickly. There's been a lot of pain.
Yeah.
But there is a future out there.
Yeah.
And it's very, very positive. And the advice is exactly the same as before, except with a lot more agility and a lot more forward looking in your business.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that applies generally in careers. And it might be that we've got people watching who aren't going to set up their own business. But you mentioned the word passion. And when I go and speak to, sixth form school audiences, I talk about, passion and persistence needed in your career. I think finding something you're passionate about, but also just persisting. There's a lot to just, what's the Winston Churchill KBO? I won't use what the B word is, probably a different one from the one you're going to use. But I think actually you can go look it up afterwards if you don't know. But there's a lot to be said for that. Is it actually just keep going?
It is. And again, today we're marking the launch of 2 specific schools at Solent, which is law and business.
Yep.
And those are key staples of our business world, of our world, of our economy.
Yep.
Business makes all the money and the lawyers just charge the fees and take it off them. Did I just say that? I'm going to have a little fun.
Well, what's that sort of, that law is the second oldest profession in the world, apparently.
Yeah, indeed. I'd argue it was the first. I've got many mates that are lawyers, and we can never decide that particular issue. But yeah, both those schools are important. Law and business was always seen as massively academic. Now, law is a lot more academic than business, I'm going to say. You can argue with me if you like, but it is.
Yeah. Well,
business.
Yes.
Business is about common sense.
But you have to have a feel for it, don't you? You've got to have an innate.
You do have to. Yes, you've got to be passionate about it to be successful. There's no question. And everybody can be in business. Everybody can play football at a certain level. Not all Premier League players, we're not all Championship players. We all enjoy playing football, whether we're boys, girls, or whatever, but we play at a level and we enjoy it.
Yeah.
But business is so much based on common sense. And the learnings on the way, the academic learnings on the way, are just as important. But I've never absolutely met a successful business person who has just got academia as their trait. Yeah. It's about a huge amount of common sense. So everybody out there who's planning to do business, for me, it was never daunting. As I said, I didn't have an academic background, but it was never ever daunting for me. Yeah. Because it was just common sense. And everything I was learning on the way, I'd rather learn it, by the way, at uni and not have the painful experiences I had on the way. And I've had a few. I've had the good, the bad, and the ugly. But it makes us who we are today.
What's been your most formative experience?
My most formative experience is having a rapid growth, a rapid rise in business. I mean, absolutely rapid. Left school at 16 as a Scottish certificate in colouring in maps. By the time I was 27, 11 years later, I was chairman of a public company and gone from living in a council flat to a sort of 7-bedroom mansion with a swimming pool and snooker table. Everything I thought I wanted at the time, by the way. Be careful for what you want.
Yeah.
And this massive rise, but with this rapid rise was an even faster decline.
Yeah.
And that was painful, but it happened. For me, I was incredibly fortunate because it happened at an early age. So I could learn from it and I could go again.
Yeah.
So how's that? That for me was by far the most formative experience I had, because I'd never experienced anything like that. I never expected to experience anything like that. And when it comes, no, it's not just humbling, but it teaches you so much about life, not just business. So it's all out there. But if we can teach it and teach it in a honest, logical, common sense way, I think it gives people a great opportunity to leave formal education and actually finish off the education in the world of business, but with a great foundation, so that maybe you don't have to have those real formative experiences.
But life experience is very important, actually. I think in shaping all of us, and I think also 2020 has shown, hasn't it, exactly what's important and what's not.
Well, I don't think anybody expected 2020 to be anything like that. Now, if we go back to recent times, there was a famous referendum a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I lived that experience. Yeah.
Talk to me about it.
Well, so I would divide my political career, and that's partly one of the reasons I ended up leaving the House of Commons last year. I would divide my political career into, well, obviously it was trying to get into Parliament, and it took 6.5 years of nursing my seat in Loughborough, which was held by the Labour Party before I won it off them. So that was obviously part of the career, and then got in, and 2010, very new. By 2014, I was in the cabinet, and July 2014 became Education Secretary. And I, part of the coalition, we were doing stuff, won 2015 election, and then the referendum came along. And regardless of whose side you're on, and I still join in conversations where people are still trying to sort of refight it, which I think is a fool's errand. The fact is, it happened. And politics.
Yeah, but it is, in fairness, not so to interrupt, in fairness, it's great fun over a glass of wine. It's great sport.
Well, that's true. But you have to agree, we had to ban it over the Christmas table as a discussion one year because it all got very, very heated. So, but 2016 came and went, and for me, obviously politics changed. I was talking about formative experiences. I was, dispensed with, no longer needed in the cabinet, and that's certainly a formative experience. It's certainly incredibly high profile, and I learned, a huge amount from responding to that, which I didn't always do as brilliantly and as politely as I should have done. But then, obviously, for 3 years, the House of Commons and the 2017 election, where, basically we ended up with effectively almost no majority, was a deeply, deeply painful experience. And I think frustrating for people watching because Parliament, the Commons in particular, just could not find an answer to this particular issue. And there's reasons for that and everything else. And it also became very, very heated on social media, very abusive. I expect to get people who disagree with me, absolutely politically, and people will get sometimes, constituents have issues that really, really matter to them, and they can get very passionate about them, and particularly when it is, I don't know where my next amount of money is coming from. I don't know how to feed my children tonight. But the organised, systematic abuse, particularly of female MPs, and sadly it continues today, was something I never expected to be filing witness statements and prosecuting people and supporting the police and prosecuting them. So, it got to the stage in 2019 where obviously change of Prime Minister, I was invited back in the cabinet, did a wonderful job in DCMS. But I think for me, politics had changed and the relationships had changed because of the referendum fallout. And it was time. One of the great tricks in life, I think, is knowing when it's time to move on. And it's hard sometimes, particularly if you've got a job that is amazing, which being an MP is, but it also takes a lot out of those around you. And it was time for me to move on, and I made that decision. And you sort of know in your heart of hearts that it was the right thing to do. But of course, when you've had something that is completely all-encompassing in your life, it's a difficult thing to give up. And I'm very pleased that I'm there able to play a little part from the red benches now.
Well, we talked about COVID, change in the world we're living, and things will never be the same again. I found that particular time quite a defining moment, because I experienced for the first time incredibly divisive politics, which we've had to live through, especially with our friends across the pond. Although there's been a change there, we've had to live with, and in my humble opinion, it still exists. Even in the UK, it's a different type of politics to the one I thought I grew up in, which was, I mean, I've been frustrated how courteous politicians would be to each other sometimes, and when really, when I knew they just want to punch each other's lights out, but actually they could still be courteous.
Well, you have to be,
even with that feeling that they wanted to punch each other's lights out. So it didn't then filter across into the wider community. But when you had that very divisive, very aggressive types of politics, that's where there's that litmus paper. It just, blotting paper, like, it just carried on going and spreading out into the community where people, I know exactly what you're talking about. People didn't have, because I had a view at the time, and I wrote about my views. People didn't have that filter to stop the outpouring of what was sometimes incredibly vile comments. And in some cases, when you challenged them, you realise people didn't know what they were talking about.
Absolutely.
Or they, in some cases. They poured out an emotion, but it wasn't really what they meant.
Absolutely.
But that came from the centre. And it came from Westminster, I'm afraid. I mean,
no, I
harsh
agree.
here.
No, I
So what do we have to do in politics now to get rid of that culture? And we don't have to return to the past. We've discussed this, but have a culture which is different, which is more courteous in our discussions.
Well, I mean, I do think politics, like the economy, is always on a cycle. But the Brexit thing was something that I think we had never experienced anything like this before, or certainly not for a long time. And there were times when there were echoes of kind of almost a civil war from several hundred years ago, and people being really divided. And I've lost friendships over it. People I would consider to be good friends who we just don't speak anymore, which is a great shame, really. I do think that the passing of time. So I do think that actually. Obviously, having the change of prime minister, election result last year, withdrawal agreement, we'll see what happens. Obviously, with the ongoing negotiations, but I do think 2020, as I say, I mean, the events of 2020 have reminded us, what is important and have forced us to move on, forced politics to move on. There's been a change of leadership in the opposition as well, which I think is making a huge difference to that party. And I think will bring back a more normal sense of two-party, party politics in the way that we perhaps would have had. And we will start discussing issues. And as you say, there will be times when people fundamentally disagree, but we have to be polite to each other in the chamber. And actually, there's always a sort of respect for each other, even if you do disagree on politics on the other side, because you know what it's like to be a frontline politician and a member of parliament and what people are going through. So I think we will get there, but you're completely right about culture and the importance of culture, whether you're talking about the business world, whether you're talking about education, universities, whether you're talking about Westminster. And I do feel very strongly that Westminster let the country down by not being able to find a way through this. We were given whatever we thought about it, an instruction, and you can argue referendums don't sit well with our current way we have a parliamentary democracy. I think that's right, but it is what it is. We had an instruction and we couldn't actually find our way through. And whilst I don't excuse all the strong views and everything else, I do understand from talking to many thousands of people about this, why people got so frustrated.
Okay, so just closing that particular subject, do you believe we have now come to an acceptance of where we're going with regards to the subject matter and the present structure of the government as it is at the moment? Do you think they have embraced new type, reverting back to the type of politics that, as the electorate, we want to see?
So just in terms of acceptance, I do think that certainly in the, so my view very much was that the people who voted for Brexit absolutely still want, expect it to go ahead. And actually, in a typical British fashion, most people, even those who didn't support it, were like, well, that's what's happened, we all move on. That's why Westminster took a long time to catch up with that. And I do know that people in Westminster who felt very strongly that they did not agree with Brexit have come to a grudging acceptance. I think there will always be rumblings of why do we do this, and what's it all for, and everything else. But I do think there is also an acceptance. We need to look forward, and I think in terms of government, I think both civil service but ministers are identifying the challenges, the opportunities. Much will depend obviously on what happens in terms of the Brexit deal, which I do think is more likely than not. The fact that both sides are still talking, and I think that the 1st of January people do understand it's frustrating for businesses affected. I appreciate, because this uncertainty is still there, but I think that both sides accept that we need a deal for the 1st of January. But I also think that...
Do you read anything in the fact that there's been change of advisors at number 10, that's more likely than not now? Do you think that gives us a clue?
I'm not necessarily sure, because I think the Prime Minister himself is pretty, the conversations I've had with him, he has very strong views about Brexit and what he wants to achieve by it, and he's very conscious of fulfilling promises made both in the election last year to the so-called red wall seats that we won, but also people who voted for it in 2016. So I think the advisors leaving Downing Street was much more about a culture, but also about trying to move other things forward. Where, as I say, I think the structure wasn't right in terms of getting the best advice to the Prime Minister to enable him to the widest viewpoint, which I think as a leader, whether you're a chief executive, chairman, or prime minister, you absolutely need to have. I was just going to say, I do think that ministers also, so things like trade agreements are going to be phenomenally important. I don't think we've realised quite yet how important that's going to become in terms of both for businesses, but also for scrutiny in Parliament. Other countries that do have their own trade policy, it's a huge part of what's always being negotiated, amended, tweaked, being legislated for. So
there's two life-changing events that have happened, COVID and the EU referendum. As a former education minister, secretary, not a secretary, has that changed the role of universities in your view?
I'm not sure it's necessarily changed the role of universities, but I think your point about work readiness is incredibly important. And also in terms of, I do think, culture is very important. And I mean, one of the things about 2020, of course, has been that students coming to any university, and I'm sitting here, I was saying to Professor Stanton earlier on that I represented Loughborough University for almost 10 years, and at times I felt like I was Loughborough University's Member of Parliament. And I got a good understanding of the way universities work. And I think there's sometimes a temptation, those involved in higher education will absolutely know this, but there's a temptation amongst policymakers, commentators, people outside in higher education, just to think about students and degrees. And of course, universities do so much more than that in terms of research, being catalysts for local, national, international economic growth. So I think actually probably we'll wait again to see what happens in the spending review, but things like the industrial strategy, which needs to be refreshed, harnessing our higher education is going to be incredibly important in that. And actually, as Professor Stanton said in her introduction, the students who will go to the business and law schools, getting their education right, unleashing their ambitions, critical for the economic growth of the country.
You mentioned the red walled northern town cities and the constituencies. How do you feel this will change. I mean, we had George Osborne's Northern Powerhouse vision. I don't know how many years ago that was, but it was quite a while ago now.
Yes.
But we haven't really seen much come out of that. And what we've seen with COVID is a slightly political divide happening again, which is unfortunate. How do you think we will come out of COVID and the EU and able to reunite the country and create business opportunities, not just in the South, but business opportunities? Many of our students, even though they're in the South, come from up north, from all around the world, actually.
Yeah.
And there are actually lots of people actually do want to go back home when they're grown up and start their businesses there. Do you think we're in a position, we're still in a difficulty where we have to start our businesses in the South now to find the backing, the markets, and the advice and help that we need to be successful? Or can we look at our businesses back in the Midlands, in the northern cities?
So the answer is, I hope very much that we can. We should look. I think there's also, I mean, there is a lot of concentration on London and the South in I say in England, in United Kingdom, more so than I think in other jurisdictions where they separate out. They've got different places for the financial capital and for the political capital. But we are where we are. I think in a funny sort of way, Theo, maybe this year is going to provide that catalyst, because I think a lot of people have realised actually working from home, working remotely, they don't need to be in London and the South East to do these things. And potentially, as people live life more and more online, more retail online, more other opportunities, actually being based outside London and the South East is going to be more and more effective. And I think, we may hear more about this, today. The Treasury talking about moving civil servants, having a proper sort of Treasury campus in, I think it's the North East that they are talking about. And there's a bit of education. I think levelling up, it's too easy to say it's just about infrastructure. Train lines, obviously, they matter and everything else, but matter less in a way, potentially, as people are commuting less and less. Better broadband, so actual connectivity, better, I know, we talked about it earlier on, 5G, the importance of telecoms and everything else. But you mentioned my education role, and I am passionate about making sure that we have, or I was when I was able to be the role, I still am passionate, but others pull the levers now. We have great schools everywhere that absolutely do talk to young people about what's out there, the opportunities. That's why, I'm involved in the careers sector still, because I think it's phenomenally important. And we have great cities. I went to visit Tech UK up in Manchester. Fantastic digital entrepreneurs up there being encouraged. People, we're about to have, sadly, as you say, a lot of people have lost jobs, be looking for new roles, new experiences, new skills, and don't need to move in order to do that. There are opportunities there, but it's going to require a very coherent response from government and from ministers, very determined. I think we still have an awful lot of our officials, senior officials in government, who are very London-centric. That's not their fault. That's just their experience. And I'm sitting here in the Midlands as a Midlands MP, reminding people all the time in government about the Midlands perspective. And I'm sure people from further north feel even more frustrated than I did. So, we talked again about politics and perhaps becoming more normalised. I will suspect that this is going to become a really big part of the political debate, in the run up to the 2024 election, hopefully as we talk about public health less.
Well, I utterly agree with you. I think this pandemic has pulled the trigger for the levelling out, not because of political will, it just has. Yeah. Because I've been against the spending of a fortune, not a small fortune, a large fortune on HS2. But my view has always been, scrap it, don't waste the money, just give fast connectivity to every sheep, in every field, in every hillside, in every village, right? In every city, in every corner. Yeah. Because why would I want to spend £500,000 on a 2-bedroom apartment in suburbia, Putney, for instance, the outskirts of London. And you're going to bring your family up, when you can have a fantastic house somewhere with green fields, with great schools, with very little commuting, and be able to work from home, or most of your time from home. This is something that I was talking about way before COVID. And that's what the government should have concentrated on, is actually giving connectivity, as opposed, why do we want to have a railway line that brings everybody down to London? We don't want everybody down to London. People don't particularly want to come to London, only come to London because they need to work.
Which they don't necessarily need to do anymore in London.
Exactly. Yeah. So, the point is that this has now changed. And I hope we don't waste any more money on HS2, and we do put the money, because we're investing in technology that's hundreds of years old, for goodness sake. Let's invest in the modern technology and give people what they really want to do. And certainly within my business, and I'm as guilty as everyone else on this, I always enjoyed having people in the office, or everybody in the office, and seeing people. But what we've found, actually, it's not just a case of someone having 1 day working from home. They can work 3 days from home, and they can be effective. But we still need to have a face-to-face conversation in real life, not just on screen. So we still need to travel, but less than before, which means people can enjoy the countryside, enjoy what's out there, and not actually have this focus of people in the south. So our office in Wimbledon, we're head office in Crewe up north, and an office in Wimbledon. The Wimbledon office has got about 200 people in, and Crewe has about, I would say, 300, maybe 400 people. Since the pandemic, we have not had more than 20 people in the office at any one time. Our lease is due to expire next December, and we've already given notice that we need only half the space. Because I can't see us ever going back to that. Which will mean my colleagues will now start looking at where they could have quality of life. Is it living close to the office in Wimbledon and paying ridiculous prices for property? Or can they now move out because any commuting will be done once a week, and that's fine, we can do that. They can drive in and have no one else stay if they need to or whatever, but they can bring the families up and spread the load across the economy. And that's what some of the positive things are going to come out from the pandemic.
I agree.
And also the delivery of education. And we've learned amazing things at Solent, and I'm sure other universities have done as well, how we can deliver quality courses and learning on an online basis, and how we can expand our reach to people. So there's lots of things that have come out of this. But going back to you and going back to law. Nikki Morgan has just finished getting a fantastic degree from Oxford University, and is going to go into the world of work. What would you say to that Nikki Morgan today?
Well, sadly, I didn't get. I got a degree from Oxford. I didn't get a fantastic degree because I spent far too much time politicking. But however, that was all useful experience. I mean, I would do it all over again. But I would, as I said I think partly through, law is a fantastic foundation. I never regret. In fact, I thank on a daily basis the fact that I love my law degree. As my tutor said, I could have done a bit more to read around it, but and I absolutely am grateful that I was a trainee solicitor and I went and did law for as long as I did, because the thing about, I mean, law, it underpins so much. And it gives you that confidence. And certainly as a member of parliament, you are a legislator, but equally when constituents came to me with queries and I would be able to, talk about legal system, look at stuff they'd given me, whether in fact it was, I couldn't give legal advice, but I could give a sense of this is serious or no, this is who you could talk to and everything else. But it gives you that confidence. And now I'm sitting on a couple of boards, and again, being able to listen to discussions about court cases or legal agreements, deals being done. It is fantastic. So if we have any lawyers or aspiring law students on the call, I think you have made a brilliant choice, because I am grateful every day for the discipline that a legal training gives you in terms of logical thinking. And be able to make an argument and be an advocate. As you say, there are formative experiences I wish I hadn't experienced all the way through, but actually I would say to the 18 or 21-year-old Nikki, go and do it again.
Excellent, great advice. And I see that Karen has popped up on the screen, and that's our cue to say she's back in charge.
It is. Thank you. Wow. Theo, Nikki, thank you. What a fantastic event. Thank you so much for a really stimulating and engaging and enjoyable hour. I'm sure if we had another hour, we still wouldn't have heard enough. So thank you. I think the key things that stand out for me this morning, a couple of key watchwords really: agility, resilience, passion and persistence. They're key watchwords. Theo, you said don't lean into the past. Really start to take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of us now. And I think for universities, for higher education more generally, and for our graduates, really let's support them. Let's support the sector. Let's support our students. Let's support our graduates really to succeed and to really capitalise on the opportunities that will be presented in the future. So enormous thank you. I have to say, just listening to kind of the experiences, the choices that you've made, your determination really to succeed in the face of a whole range of challenges throughout your life has been really fascinating. And I have to say, really quite inspiring. I'm sure the audience have been inspired. So for me, I think the university's made the right decision here to establish these 2 new schools, based on everything that we've heard this morning. Our role now as a university, under the leadership of Caroline Walsh, our new director of the business school, and Kevin Rogers, our new director of the law school, is to really meet the challenges and deliver against the opportunities that we've heard so much about this morning. So thank you again on behalf of the audience. Thank you also to the audience for joining us today and for the questions that you sent through. We've addressed, I know, some of them. I'm sure we could have had many, many more, but thank you. And for those of you who want to find out more about the business school or the law school that we're setting up, please don't hesitate to contact either Caroline or Kevin. They're both keen to establish really strong partnerships, both internally, but also crucially outside of the university as well. So thank you again, both. Have a good day, everyone, and please take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.